Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Talking with Tim Takis, elder law attorney, and something that has happened here recently. Estate planning. I want to get into that. The death of Prince has really shed light, the rock star Prince, has shed light on what happens if you don't have a will. Here's someone infinitely wealthy, unmarried, no children. There he is. He died suddenly at age 57. He has no will. So there's a fortune there. What happens with all of that?
Right. And of course, we've heard a lot about, recently, okay, he died, he has no will. The sister comes forward and says, well, I looked and there ain't no will that I've been able to find. Then he has half brothers and sisters or whatever. And according to Minnesota law, they all treated the same. And you've heard me say this before, the people who watch regularly, know that, that if you die without a will, it goes to your spouse.
Automatically
if you goes to your spouse, if you have no children. If you have children, and you have a spouse, then some goes to your spouse and then some goes to your children. If you have no spouse but you have children, it all goes to your children. If you have no spouse and children, it goes up, is what we say, is goes to your parents. And apparently Prince his parents are deceased. So then it goes out, as we say, as we goes out to the siblings. And under Minnesota law, whether they're half siblings or full siblings, they share equally. It's we were chatting just before before we went back on, and we talked about why do people who are smart, obviously smart people, have the money is not the issue, meaning it's not like he could not afford it, and probably not even, he would probably have the foresight to do it, but at the same time, because he had agents and whatever. But the thing there is that, someone who's 58 or 59 years old, all they do all day is think about creating stuff. They don't think about saving things, and conserving things and seeing how they're going to pass on, to the next generation. Because who is he close to? I mean, we don't really know. Was he close to his siblings? I don't know. Where there's really not. So who would he be planning for one? But then we start thinking about this. Is what was probably the most valuable. What was his most valuable thing that he left behind, or that he left? Well, that he left with us.
It's all that music. And the royalties
his art.
Music.
His art and his music, and one of the things that he could have done. And maybe if he would have known that, maybe my time here is not as short and long as I think it is, he would have had a plan for, I'm going to say set those assets aside in a trust, set aside them in a corporation, maybe, separate himself from the ownership so that, those assets would be managed. I mean, one of the things that we know, like for instance about the Elvis Presley estate, is that Priscilla Presley, who apparently was the one that took over after, Elvis died, was and is a very shrewd business person. And she said, okay, how do I protect and preserve the Elvis legacy? I don't know how much of an estate plan he had, but he had a lot of things out there that that had value, and her job, is preserving that estate, and you can see what it sort of amounted to.
How often do you see that really wealthy people die, no estate planning whatsoever? That's I would think it's unusual.
I would say so. I would say it's unusual, particularly people who died. I won't say they expected it, but they were older. They were elderly. I mean, even somebody like, I think David Bowie he had an estate plan. I mean, he died at about I think he was a little older than Prince. But he died in his early 60s, and I guess he had an estate plan. But he was a businessman, and I think if you kind of look back and about some of the things that he did, he was very astute.
Well, let's go to Joanne. Hello, Joanne.
Yes.
Hi, go right ahead.
I wanted to find out, if I may, it appears that we have a child, a grown child, that has developed an illness that is a mental illness, that has 3 children and is married. She is an only child. We have accumulated quite a bit, and are in retirement, about retirement age, and going in that direction very shortly, and are very confused about what we should do. And I'll leave it at that and listen.
So let me see. Joanne says that. I'm sorry. Did I pick up? Joanne, are you married?
Oh yes.
Okay, so you and your husband have the one child.
We do.
And it's a she, he?
She.
So she is, how old is she?
35.
35, and married, unmarried?
Married.
Okay, she's married, and she's developed, a mental illness of some sort.
Hereditary.
Yeah.
Mental illness.
Right. And are you thinking about your estate planning, or hers, or both, or her spouse's, or what's
only us at this point?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because
about to go into retirement.
Yeah.
And having what I would consider to be a substantial, portfolio.
Right.
And it sounds like she's concerned about leaving it to her daughter if she's not able to care for. But is there some way she could care for her daughter? Yeah, and if it gives any comfort to Joanne to know is that we see this sort of situation regularly in our office, where we have elderly parents that present, and their primary worry is the 50-some or 60-some-year-old child who maybe is never married, but has been disabled maybe since birth, but maybe at a young age, and they have essentially cared for that child and been somewhat protective of that child, for that most of that child's life, and now they're going, now what do we do? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's another child or children that maybe the child has siblings, but sometimes they do not. And now it's like, okay, so what should our plan be now? Because who's going to step in and take care of our daughter? If both of my husband and I have passed away, and that's one of those things where. First, like I ask about is that, okay, she's married, so presumably there's some support there, perhaps from her. She may have children, maybe she doesn't, the daughter. But as the parents, they have to think about, all right, we have money and property, and we have enough to, maybe to support themselves, through their lifetimes. So do they set money aside in a trust for their daughter? Do they do that now? Do they wait for their estate plan? Do they wait till they both pass away? And then in their estate plan set money aside in a trust? Who would be the trustee? Who's going to hold that money, for the benefit of their daughter? Would it be the spouse? Right.
Perhaps not. Maybe that. Just even though that spouse may be a very good spouse and a loving spouse, maybe that's not a good plan. Maybe it should be a third party. Maybe it should be a professional trustee.
Like an attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, they could theoretically set it up so an attorney administers it and gives money out.
Or at least have somebody that is, I sometimes I think about that person as, because, it's very possible that, and this has happened, where the client comes in and says, I really don't have anybody, that would be the trustee, for my disabled daughter. And I say, so nobody? And they say, well, I've got a cousin or a nephew who lives in Vermont or someplace. And I might say, why don't you talk to him or her and ask them if they would be the trustee, but only for the purpose of, when you pass away, and then the nephew steps in and comes maybe to our office or somebody else's office and says, okay, my aunt named me my trustee, what am I supposed to do? And my response to that person to the nephew would be, what your aunt wants you to do, is to choose somebody, to be the person to pick, it's okay for you to say, I can't do this, I don't want to do this.
Right.
You know, but what she wants you to do is come to me or come to some other professional, you know, and have that conversation of, you know, because in that estate plan, I've said in there that it gives the nephew, you know, the right to pick somebody,
right,
to select a trustee. So the nephew would select maybe a professional trustee, you know, select somebody else, so that they then can get that support system in place, because that's what she's worried about.
So if you have someone who is mentally ill or whatever, maybe they're addicted, and that's not the situation perhaps with Joanne, but they have concerns about leaving them a lot of money.
Right.
So you have a trustee. You give it, you know, you say, nephew, you do it. The nephew comes back and says, I'm not ready. They give it to a professional.
Right.
How does a professional know when so-and-so legitimately needs money, and so-and-so is doing things that are harmful to themselves?
The hard part, and that's the concerns that parents have, because they know their child, you know, and nobody else knows that child like they do. You know, they don't know. Do they eat eggs for breakfast? You know, do they prefer showers or baths? You know, do they, you know, I mean, all those sorts of things that, you know, even the nephew doesn't know. And then so part of that then becomes, you know, now I think it's, you know, now it's the parents, you know, the Joanne's, you know, and her husband, you know, they have to start thinking about what the world is going to look like for their child when they're not in it. Mm-hmm. What does somebody like a nephew or a professional trustee, what do they need to know about their child, you know, so that child has the best chance, you know, to be able to, you know, to be able to have a productive, you know, and happy life. You know, and so that's the key thing for her, is to start thinking about, what's the world going to look like when we're not in it? What does somebody need to know? I've heard some of my colleagues talk about letters of, you know, letters to the trustee, letters of intent, letters of instruction. You know, I would suggest that, you know, she could go online and she could Google on some of those terms. You know, and in the special needs community, you know, they're very, you know, in tune to that. You know, so so Joanne might start thinking about, she and her husband might start thinking about, you know, we need to start having, you know, getting involved with the special needs community. You know, I think the NAMI is called National Association of Mental Illness or something. I think they just call it NAMI now. You know, Mental Health America, you know, is another organization. They have a chapter here in Middle Tennessee. You know, they do not only Alzheimer's and things, but they also do younger people who have mental health issues. You know, there's a lot of support out there, you know, and it sounds like that's something that, you know, she and her husband start hooking up.
So there is a way to make this work.
Yes,
right, Joanne,
there absolutely is.
Thank you for that call. It's a good call.
Absolutely.
Good question.
Yeah.
David and others, stay on the line. We're going to take a break. If you want to call in, there's a number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.